Well, good morning, everyone. Here we are with another round of the 3 or 4 consulting amigos. And today we're going to touch on a subject that's really interesting to a lot of us, the wealthy in small business, because I think one of the fascinating things, and Ed's kind of referred to this, is, small business can produce an enormous amount of wealth, and particularly for families, et cetera. So Ron's going to address it, and we're going to have a conversation about wealth in small businesses. So Ron, with that, take us away.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let me just double check and see if you can see the screen all right.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, good. So I happened to read an article that was a book review, and it was written by a gentleman by the name of Tom Corley, The Rich Habits, the Daily Success Habits of Wealthy Individuals. He calculates wealthy individuals as those people who are making at least $160,000 a year with a minimum of 2.3 million in assets, and so that would definitely be wealthy. I would say that many people think wealthy have fewer assets than that, maybe half of those assets. But nonetheless, what we wanted to talk about is really what are the things that drive people to get to the point of wealth? What are the secrets? Are they personal habits? Are there real secrets in business? What are they? Well, I found that along with this gentleman, there are several other notable people who have made successful, have written about or developed the sort of habits of the rich as well. So I thought maybe we'd compare them and see how that was a little bit by looking at several of them. We'll start by looking at this gentleman, Napoleon Hill, and this is a little bit well, it's comprehensive, I guess, because one is 7 habits and another is 4 habits, and here we got 13. So there are quite a few folks. So I thought I'd go through this just to kind of lay the groundwork. Now, Napoleon Hill, many of you have heard of. It's probably one of the most famous books on success in history, and it was used to build on other books, and other people have utilized his works. Tony Robbins, Norman Vincent Peale, and many other sort of people who were thrown into this category of motivators that have gone to what Napoleon Hill had to say, and he broke them into these 13 pieces here, of which I've put a couple of them together to get them on the page. And I'm going to go through them because we can't spend some of these are understood, so we don't need to spend much time talking about them. One of them is desire, faith, and autosuggestion. Not one, 3 of them. Desire is you want to do it. You have to have the desire to do it. Faith is in the belief in something greater than yourself. Autosuggestion is sort of this kind of thing. This was written in the 20s, 30s, 1937. And so it's a little bit different attitude than the way we think about today. It makes me wonder if maybe we need to kind of get back to some of these things. This autosuggestion is really the way that you convince yourself that you can do things, and it has a lot to do with forming your drive. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And then he also lists things that we've talked about before: specialized knowledge, it's needed for the particular industry; imagination, I think we've talked about that a lot. Organized planning, we really talk about that a lot, and that is one of the elements. He says something here which is interesting: decision. In other words, you have to make quick decisions based on data. And that's interesting because our friend and psychologist Richard Trafton, Trafton was basically saying he had said to me one time in doing an evaluation of one of my clients. He said this person is too slow at making decisions and will never be really successful. because the average entrepreneur, is making like 60 decisions an hour. And it's like boom, 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 boom. You have to make a decision, make a decision, make a decision. And this particular individual would struggle and lament over a word in a letter maybe all day long. And he's just saying, you're not productive enough because you're not making decisions fast enough. You have to make decisions. Persistence is something that I think we all recognize is really important. You can't, if you've got a good idea, you've made good decisions, you can't give up. You just have to keep after that if you're convinced it's the right thing to do. This power of mastermind is kind of interesting, and Ray, you may have a comment, to say about this, because what this is a group of trusted advisors. At first, it's a little fuzzy until you dig into it, but it's like Carnegie, who was one of the gentlemen that Napoleon Hill studied. He studied 6 or 7 people on the inside of their businesses. One of them was Andrew Carnegie. These were the people who really were the leaders of the golden age of business. And basically what he had said, the example was that Carnegie had 50 people in his organization and around him that he relied on in order to be able to help with very specific problems. And he used them as his mastermind group in order to be able to solve problems that had been identified. And so, he was talking about putting a group of people together that you trust to do that. Not everybody can do that, certainly not very many people. Spelling negative influences, it talks about the 6 basic fears, which are the fear of dying, the fear of poverty, the fear of starving to death, and just getting that out of your system. Well, not very many people of us necessarily have the fear of starving anymore, and maybe we're even done. So I'm not sure how much we think of that today, but those are certainly real around the world. And so that's interesting to be able to kind of get things out of the way so you can focus and get everything, pointed towards your business. So that's sort of in a nutshell, Napoleon Hill. And so then this Habit of the Rich, this Tom Crowley that I mentioned, he's got some things here which are kind of interesting, and I guess you could kind of go, yeah, of course, early to rise, everybody says, the early bird catches the worm. We've said that a long time. I was listening to Victor David Hanson the other day, who's written 24 books, writes 3 articles a week, is on innumerable other shows, just so busy you can't believe it. And he was asked, how do you get all this done? And he said, well, I don't sleep very well, so I'm up at 4:30 and I spend an hour and a half on the news. I spend 2 more hours writing articles. Then my secretary has got a schedule from about 11 until 3 o'clock. And then that's when I do my speeches. That's when I do online commentary and podcasts, and interviews. That's when I do all of that stuff. And then at 3 o'clock, I start working on my book, and I'll work until 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. Okay, there's a guy that obviously is successful, and he obviously fits this category. Lunch, yes. Breaks, no. This Corley says everybody he talked to is highly successful, never took breaks. I don't know what to think about that in terms of workers who are forced to take a break. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that or comments? It's like, don't take a break. Do you have the stamina to actually be able to get through this thing? I don't know.
Well, I think it comes down to what kind of job you're doing. If you're in a factory,
yeah,
a repetitive job, break seems more essential. But if you're really into something and you really enjoy doing what you're doing, there's no reason to have a break because you're living the life. You're enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I can kind of see that.
I agree. I really think that spending time doing your work is a critical part of being successful in anything, whether you're a small businessman or not. And to be told you cannot work there's something about that just a little tough. The people who I know who are successful don't take breaks even when it's illegal. I have one son who works for a big corporation. He doesn't take breaks, and he'll have lunch, and he'll also take a break when his family needs it. But he'll work late into the night, and usually puts in 9 or 10 hours a day. He just doesn't report it. He
Yeah.
works.
Oh, yeah.
He works at home, and so he reports that he worked, 8 hours a day, just like everybody else. So, it's sort of like, okay, those of you out there who want to be successful, listen to this. When you're in a company and you're told you must take a break, consider that you're not as productive as the guy who isn't taking that break.
Well, let
Somebody,
me make an observation on that, Ron. I think, what we're discussing here is mental labor is a lot different than physical labor.
Yeah.
And, having worked on as a laborer in the union many years, there were times in which, a break was essential. I mean, it was like you were exhausted because physical labor was hard
yeah,
and difficult. Whereas I think, when you're doing mental stuff, I'm not saying it isn't exhausting, and it does consume an enormous amount of calories. Your brain requires an awful lot of food, but I think you can modulate it differently. And I think the break is there to modulate physical effort.
yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And today, with all of the repetitive stress syndrome and the bad backs, and all the ways that you can manage to get yourself disabled, um, you can see why it's become a legal response to a legal threat. You have to give breaks in order to be able to, but then on the other hand, take a look at the yard workers around. You see them taking breaks? No, you don't. There are a whole lot of people who are in physical jobs, and if it's an individual person, who is, say, a guy coming over mowing your lawn, he doesn't want to take a break. Why? Because he's getting X amount of dollars for the job. And he knows, if he's trying to get ahead, he knows that he's going to make more money if he doesn't take a break.
Well,
And
and the other side of
his
that is
break,
that basically, if you take that lawn guy, he cuts your lawn in an hour, and then he takes and drives maybe 5-6 miles to another place. That's his break, and then he goes and does another one.
yeah,
So,
well, it's
I
not, but
think it's kind of built into the job.
yeah, it's not a work break though. He's working when he's going to the next job. That is just a difference of physical activity.
Yeah, I guess this is a good time to bring up the difference between blue collar and white collar too. I mean, in my career, I've had to deal with both, and they're completely opposite the way they think. And
Yeah.
we'll probably be able to expand
Yeah.
upon that. And so a lot of times, what I thought was a good decision from a white collar standpoint was a negative decision from a blue collar standpoint. And it's like we have different DNA. And so you got to be a good manager. You got to know how to motivate people on both sides of the fence.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, and it comes down to productivity. And while the word is not used in any of these comparisons today, you look over on the millionaire next door, it's hard work more than most people. Okay. That was based on millionaires, reporting back for the research on the book. And so it's sort of like, well, it's pretty clear you do have to work. And so when you are, the only way that all of us can get more money is by being a little more productive. The company has to be more productive in order to be able to pass raises along to work.
Absolutely.
And so within a company, you've got the ones who are highly productive, and are not productive. As a matter of fact, we talk about the 80-20 rule. 20% of the people are doing 80% of the valuable work in a company. So there's a real difference. And I think the point of discussing this is to say, if you want to get ahead, if you want to get extraordinarily ahead, and you want to do the things that are the habits of those who get ahead, that the not only the amount of work, but the productivity of that work is essential. And I think that's kind of what these things say.
You know, what's really interesting in looking at all this is that the one thing that isn't mentioned, and I think I've learned later on in my life it's more important, and that's the ability to learn new stuff.
Good
And
point.
constantly be reading and listening and trying to figure out new ideas to make your business more productive and successful.
Yeah, well, that's a really good observation, I think, because
Yes,
in today's world, that is way more important maybe than it was 50, 60, 80 years ago.
Absolutely.
Because you could probably, as a journeyman, you could learn most skills in 5, 6, 7 years. And I would suggest most journeymen who are smart could probably pick that up in 2 or 3 years. The whole journeyman was just a way to keep that person at a low pay for a few years longer. That's just my opinion. So really, I think that is a very, very huge key to being able to make decisions. You've got to be able to have the ability to get the data, to learn how to use the data, think about the data in order to make those decisions, in order to move forward and get people motivated to.
Yeah, the data part nowadays is so important. And it wasn't earlier in my career, it wasn't as important, but now I see the value. People that can analyze large amounts of data really provide a lot of insights on where you need to go with your company.
So we have this no slacking and no gossiping as two more things, and in the narrative that I read that goes along with this, I think slacking is obviously one. It's like, don't spend too much time around the water cooler, just doing nothing. And today's slacking is really something that happens across the board. So I suppose it's always been, you got slackers. You always have had slackers, but that's not going to get you anywhere, because the people who are watching you know you're slacking.
I call it ass time, and you guys know.
You're right. It's ass time.
That's one way of improving productivity. It's reducing ass time.
Right.
right.
But see, you're standing up at the water cooler, so you see,
Yeah.
you're trying to.
You went over that one of being calorie conscious, which I think is important, Ron. And I think what that refers to in my mind is, wealthy people are typically very disciplined. Mm-hmm. And one of the disciplines they have is, they eat right.
Yeah. Well, and I do think there's something to be said for when you take a look at some of these Napoleon Hill things, like the subconscious mind, the brain, the sixth sense. Part of that may have something to do with just the overall health. You got to keep your brain working the right way with the right amount of calories, not too many calories. And you've got to have the right nutrition in order to be able to keep your body going. And it's pretty clear that when you have a lot of extra weight, you're not moving as fast, and you're putting extra stress on your heart, etc. So but I'm not sure that's one of the key things. I think there are plenty of people who got plenty of calories who are plenty rich. So I kind of question this. The other one is limited internet. Well, I think that's pretty important for children. But if you happen to be somebody who's learning on the internet, as you mentioned, Ed, learning more and using the internet, that's just a media. That's not the message. if the message is you're learning something, I'm not sure that the internet's a problem. So I feel
Right.
like that's kind of a half-hearted one.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
think
well,
that's appropriate anymore. I just don't. I
Yeah.
mean, these young kids that are growing up now, they have access to all kinds of information, and it's amazing what they learn.
Yeah,
And we never
yeah,
had that
yeah,
ability to learn.
that's right.
right, right.
And then this
You know,
last, oh, go ahead.
Ron, what is the age of Tom Corley's book? Because, you know, obviously that would have some impact on some of these.
That's pretty. It's a recently published book, which is what I thought was interesting is that, and I hate to say it, but it feels like a lot of fluff here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
This isn't a serious book. Not that that's wrong. You know, early to rise. Okay, I mean, yes, you want to get up, but mostly you want to spend time. You know, I'm not sure that having an occasional break is going to kill you. I think it's clear that productivity is something, but you know, the one in the bottom though, I think that makes sense. You want to earn more and spend less. In other words, what he's saying is that anybody who gets ahead doesn't do deficit spending.
Right, right.
Buy things you don't have money for.
And he doesn't work for the government.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. They seem to think it does, but we'll have to pay a reckoning on that someday. But yeah, I mean, the idea, it's so easy to buy things, and getting into credit card debt is so easy to do that if you're not increasing your equity every single month, you're going to end up in a problem sooner or later. Those of us in small business have been on both sides of that. You know, I've been in horrible deep debt, and then on the other side of that, where I've paid it back, and so you take on debt when you have risk. That's kind of an important thing to do, and if you're overly conservative, it's hard to make money sometimes.
Yeah, and I have a problem with Ramsey in that area. He's so against debt. The greatest opportunities in my life of building wealth has been through loans,
Mhm.
and that I could control and I utilize as a tool. And he gets all over people for getting into debt.
Yeah, right. And
Well,
I think that you're correct. I happen to believe the same with that concept. And I think that this Tom Corley guy is really kind of thinking about personal stuff. You know, if you have so much income, don't spend more than that. But if you're investing it, it's an entirely different thing.
Absolutely.
well, I think one of the things you mentioned, Ron, is that, you know, the change in finance and how you access money has had a huge impact, I think, on the wealth of small businesses. You know, after the Depression, you know, if you didn't have money, you couldn't get money.
That's
You know,
right.
and so I think that has opened up the door for a lot of people who are able, as Ed pointed out, to be able to use those loans to increase their wealth.
Yeah, yeah. And that's exactly right. And I think the way that I measure my own personal wealth is to effectively look at the balance sheet.
Yep,
To me, that's really the issue here.
it is. It's the balance sheet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, you know, what are your equities and what are your liabilities? And if you've got more equity and if it's going up, then your overall value is going up. That's the way I think that this needs to be looked at. But
Especially in real estate. Real estate is an opportunity that most people have access to. And with real estate and using some regimented strategies there, you can really add a lot of wealth.
yes,
But and most of the time, especially in California, you can't go out and buy a house for cash.
it's tough. It's pretty darn tough.
So sometimes you need to get a loan, but you got to be able to service that loan and pay
Right.
the interest on it without it impacting you going into debt on the other side. So you have to have a balance.
Yeah. And then
But I think to your point, Ed, who was it that said, you know, they're not making any more dirt?
No, and you talk to these business owners that have been in business for 50 years. And at the end of the 50 years, where do they make the most money?
Yeah, usually real estate.
Most of the time, it's the real estate.
Yeah.
And they've got a core business that's doing okay. They're living off of the income.
Yes.
And while they're in business, they needed a building or more, and they bought a building, and that's where the money ends up being.
Yeah, that's pretty much their balance sheet, right, Ron?
During their lifetimes, that's on the balance sheet. That's exactly right. And all the, the depreciation and other write-offs that come along with owning something are very beneficial.
Minimizing tax. That's correct.
So I always liked this Millionaire Next Door, and I talked a little bit about Napoleon Hill in my book, finding your niche in the market. But I really focused a lot more on the Millionaire Next Door, because I think that it's the best study. It's pretty old now, but I don't think very many of these principles certainly haven't changed, and a lot of the data hasn't changed, with the exception of perhaps it used to be that about a third of businesses were being opened up by women, and now it's maybe half or a little bit more. So some of the stats are different, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same. Not counting for the people who start things like Tesla, those kinds of things. We're talking about the majority of just plain millionaires, not the ultra rich, but those millionaires that have done well enough to be able to sit back and kind of live off of their income when they get to retirement age. And these are the things that they found that the millionaires themselves reported, of which most of them were small business people. Integrity was number one.
Yeah.
I have found this to be true with my clients, that you hear so many bad things about businesses and business people and how businesses rip you off, and how the man has ripped you off.
Right.
But in my experience, all the successful businesses that I've dealt with, they have had an incredible level of integrity.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
Yeah, if I can, just interject there for a moment. My experience with business has been usually very, very positive. People who are in business tend to have integrity as part of their DNA. There's always that. Sadly, there's that 5% that give bad names to the 95% of us who are doing what we're supposed to.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I found that behind the scenes, so many business people, it might be paternalistic, and maybe some groups don't like that word, but out of paternalism, owners have treated their employees like family. And when times were bad, they put money of their own into the business to make sure that they could keep their employees, because they didn't want their employees to have to suffer with no paycheck.
Yeah.
This happens way more than you see in the news, because that's a good characteristic of business, and it's the kind of thing small business people do. And like you, I've run into people who have not been so didn't have so much integrity, but I find they get weeded out.
Yeah, that's right.
People figure that out and stop doing business with them, and so pretty soon they're gone. And so we end up with the ones that have been around a long time. Those are the ones who they either own their markets to such a degree, they literally own their niche, that there is no competition. They can get whatever they want for their business. But other than those, and those are few and far between because they attract competitors. But other than that, you have to have integrity in order to be able to do business in a way to treat your customers and your employees well. And we all know if you don't treat your employees well, they'll not treat your customers well. So, you have to do all of these things. So,
It works on the other side too. The business advisor, as a business advisor, I really have no desire to help anyone who doesn't have integrity.
Well, right. It's like, why beat your head against the door?
Why exactly?
Yeah, you feel enslaved to be working for people who are taking advantage of you and customers.
Exactly.
And
You
then
got to do the right thing in business if you want to
you
be
do,
successful.
you absolutely do. And then discipline. That we've talked about that with some of these others. Everybody's identified that, but it has to do with self-control.
Yeah.
You know, long-term gain and short-term, you know, being able to put off the short-term desires for the long-term good of your overall, let's say, balance sheet. And so I think it's really, and you mentioned it, Ray, those people who you notice that are doing pretty well, they really do have the ability to discipline themselves and pay attention to detail, or if not detail, they find people who are detail oriented, but they're still very disciplined. And then social skills, getting along with people. This is sort of fun because in The Millionaire Next Door, basically they talk about the majority of them being college graduates. So that puts you into a category of maybe less than half, maybe 40%, 30%, 20% maybe. It used to be 25%, I think, when the book was written, were college graduates. Of course, now the value of college is completely upended at this point, and that's another whole discussion. But the whole idea of going to college and being smart and getting an A means nothing to these people. They feel like you need social skills, and you learn social skills in college, and that's why they're there. So, you know, it wasn't about getting an education. Yes, you need to know your business and the skills required for business, but you didn't necessarily have to know everything about Plato. Not that that would hurt anybody, but as a matter of fact, history is something that I think a lot of small business people admire and would like to know more of, but they have to know more about their business first. But this whole idea of being really, really intelligent just doesn't wash. Well, now it's not that having enough intelligence isn't important. You do have to have enough intelligence, but you don't have to be incredibly intelligent. So they came out of school with a C plus, not an A, and they said their most valuable thing was in the fraternity and learning to deal with people,
Yeah.
being in social issues, and being able to read people. That's what was more important about school for them.
I think another word that might describe it better is emotional intelligence.
Yes, today that's
Yeah.
kind of what we
It's
talk.
extremely important in running a business. And social skills, that's how you connect with your customers, for God's
Right.
sake. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? So if
Right.
you have
Yeah,
social
yeah.
skills,
And finding good employees and motivating good employees, it really has an awful lot to do with that, and that's got
yes,
a
it
lot to
does.
do with business success, which creates wealth. So clearly that's very, very important. Um, by the way, and I just wanted to mention, a lot of people in this study basically said it wasn't that they couldn't achieve an A. They just didn't see that there was any value to them
Yes, yeah,
having achieved it.
right.
In other words, they didn't need that A to put that star in their chest. They already knew who they were. Kind of to maybe go back to Napoleon Hill, you know, your mind, your subconscious mind, the sixth sense, they already knew who they were. They sure didn't need to get the A in order to be able to reinforce it. So they spent their time on important things, productive things. And
Right.
therefore, they keep this productivity kind of awareness throughout their life, and it applies in their business. And so it wasn't that they weren't smart, it's that they felt as though appearing smart didn't do them any good. Now, I suppose if you're an attorney and you want to get a job at a big attorney firm, you might want to be at the top of your class. Okay, maybe that.
The same thing with the CPA profession. You know, if you really wanted to get ahead and get hired by one of the big guys, you really had to have a straight A average. Otherwise, they wouldn't even talk to you.
Yeah, right, right. Yet at the same time, you see some of the big mistakes that are made by those people. They're not immune from mistakes, are they? So,
No,
yeah.
no, that's for sure. I had a good friend who was an example of how you can have all the brains in the world but still stumble along through life. He was a member of Mensa, and last I talked to him, he was addicted to drugs and he was addicted to gambling, and it was just such a waste of a life.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Well, there are a lot of good stories about the say the Mensa group, where they just they don't desire to move ahead, or they don't care about it. I think I saw a story, the smartest person in the world, had the highest IQ of anybody in the world that had ever been tested, is a bouncer at a bar. And so they went to talk to this guy, and he would say, look, you can give me a list of numbers, I'll read them back to you. You can ask me any math problem that you want and I'll do it in my head. So that's just not a problem for me. But what I find is that trying to keep order in this place and dealing with people, now that's tough work.
Yeah.
That's where I have to actually work at that, because that takes a lot of skill. But all of this mind stuff, that's just easy. I don't need to do that.
Wow, that's good. That's interesting.
He prefers going home at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and sleeping late, and so discipline. So he didn't have the discipline to do any more than that, and so a lot of people would say, "Wow, what a waste!" And maybe it is a waste, but it's not just horsepower that gets you where you want to go. A supportive
Yeah, absolutely.
supportive spouse is a really big deal. And people might say, no, it's not such a big deal anymore. And are there single people who have had good businesses? Yeah, there are. But in this particular group, they all said that was really key. And when you dig into that a little bit, you see that the spouse is actually involved in the business in some way as well. Maybe not full time, maybe they have their own career, but they do something in the business that is quite supportive. And in addition to that, they're just all in. They want their spouse to be successfthe so
it's really interesting that I know one business in particular where the two people have been running a business, a big high stress business, and they've been married for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And they can go in and out of the business, and which is really hard. And their relationship has remained the same, or has grown. I mean, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, it is. I'm fascinated with this in light of something you said earlier, Ron. Today 50% of all new businesses are started by women.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see as this evolves whether and how they are supportive of one another and how they keep moving forward now that the dimensions of gender have changed so radically.
I have just had a discussion about women in business with a advertising lady who is trying to sell a special program, Women in Business, to women-owned businesses. And it's kind of interesting. And she had mentioned in her area, which happens to be Denver, that 52% of all businesses are started by women. However, she also said, what we want to do here, we're giving this special deal as part of the sell. We're trying to do is give more visibility to women. And they had a series of programs and advertising and discount prices and so forth, because we want to help them to be successful as other businesses. What does that mean? Well, other has to be men.
Right.
So, well, in this day and age, maybe not. I don't know, but for the most part, most of others are men. Well, so you take a look at that, and you might ask yourself, well, what's the deal there? I don't think there's any doubt in my experience. Men do not support women in their businesses the way women support men in their businesses.
I would have to agree. I think it's men as a rule are more self-serving, by nature, and
Yeah.
I mean, as women, they're designed to be more nurturing. I mean, that's part of the DNA.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of self-evident, but I think it's good for you to bring it out. I think that means that as the businesses, as the amount of women in the business grows, we will see some changes in some of those dynamics that we've just been discussing.
Yeah, and there are examples like that. There are women who start businesses that become successful enough to where their husbands get involved, and they come in and they do, they may do things that she's not good at.
Right.
Maybe they're the numbers guy in the house, and so they take over accounting. And I think that's very true in men-owned businesses. The men are the ones who are the people, folks. They are persistent. They have all these characteristics, but the one thing that they're not that good at is, say, detail, and so they don't really like accounting very much. And yeah, they can do it, but
That's very true.
they see
That's very true.
yeah, they see value. They see value in going out and getting another customer, as opposed to, well, I guess I'll stay home and do the books now. And so when the wife ends up saying, well, I know how to do that, or I can learn to do that, and they get involved in the finances of the business, wow, now things really begin to bloom. That's happened in several of my businesses where my wife came in and took over the accounting function, and took care of the banking functions and those kinds of things. And when I started businesses without her doing that function, things weren't as good because I wasn't as detailed in maybe the accounting that as it should have been.
Well, you're another example of this person I was talking about, where the two of you together are so much more powerful than you are individually. But you can do.
I'm not sure how to take that, Dad.
Well, I think there's a lot of value to that, and what's really interesting to me is how you can manage business and then go home and have a personal life and deal with the kids and not have anxieties and pressures going on between the two of you that destroy your relationship. It's hard to do to run a business as a wife and a husband, and then also go home at night and run your family. That's difficult.
Yeah.
Not many people can do it, but I tell you, the ones that can, they're powerful.
Yeah. I think that's the point you're making here, is that, those people who are really excel at social skills, and then have the other things that you were pointing out, Ron, tend to be the wealthy in business.
Yeah.
They can adapt, they can go between the roles and do it successfully.
Yeah. Well, I don't know exactly how we did it. I know that I grew up in a family that was like that. My mom was effectively the money person in my dad's practice, and he had the skill level and the people skills in order to be able to build his practice, and she had the money skills, and so that's how they did it. So now did they talk about business all the time at the table? Sometimes, not all the time, but there was enough other interesting stuff going on. My dad built his practice because he loved being in groups of people. He loved community service. He loved to sing. He was in several musical groups. So he was actually developing business when he was out doing all this.
Oh yeah.
I never saw him at home. He was never at home in the evening. He would come home, and we always had dinner together every single day. So we had breakfast together, we had dinner together. They would go off to the office. I'd go to school and come back. My mom would always be there when I got home from school, but my dad would come home later after dinner was ready, and then he was off to another function. I mean, he was gone 5 or 6 nights a week. And so
Wow.
that was his life. It helped build his business, and I just thought it was normal. So I mean, I didn't know
Yeah,
it.
right,
See,
right.
I just don't know it. Now, Molly came from a different family. She came from a corporate family, but he did quite well in a large company. And in those days, women were supposed to be supportive at the corporate level. What do you have to be a good corporate wife?
Right.
So there was that kind of support. It was a little different. She wasn't directly involved in his business in any way, shape, or form. But in terms of the social part, she definitely was. I mean,
Right.
they had executives over to their house. The house had to, look a certain way. They took people to dinner. They would meet after golf. They would be invited by one of the vendors to the mansion to play golf or to go on the big boat. I mean, if the wife was not copacetic with what was going on in the executive's world, the executive didn't make it.
Yeah, I think you're right. What I'd like to suggest is why don't we pick this up next week and take it from there? There's obviously a lot of stuff that you have not covered. And I think it's a topic that's worth discussing again. Ed, are you okay with that?
Oh, yeah, I just found this to be a fascinating program, very interesting.
Okay, well that sounds good. And we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, thank you, Ron.